Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News Extra, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya studios. These are our top stories. Putin begins his two-day trip of India as he prepares for trade talks with longtime ally Narendra Modi. US and Ukraine negotiators will meet in Miami to discuss ongoing peace plans as Ukraine accuses Putin of wasting the world's time. And a look into Epstein's Island. Democrats reveal photographs and videos as government files are released. Russia's President Vladimir Putin begins his two-day trip to India today, meeting Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The two leaders and longtime allies are expected to sign a number of trade deals together, including defense and labor. Putin is also expected to discuss India's ongoing use of Russian oil as US President Donald Trump puts a pressure on Modi to stop buying it. Here's what Putin said ahead of the trip.
We aim to elevate cooperation with the People's Republic of China and the Republic of India to a qualitatively new level by strengthening its technological component. This is the objective of numerous joint projects in energy, industry, space, agriculture, and other sectors. We have established a substantive dialogue on economic issues with the President of the People's Republic of China, Mr. Xi Jinping. We will also discuss these topics in detail during the upcoming visit to India with Prime Minister Narendra Modi, including increasing imports of Indian goods to our market.
To discuss this and all of today's stories, I'm joined by Shane McGinley, news editor at Arabian Gulf Business Insight and chairperson of the Department of Security and Strategic Studies at the American University in the Emirates, Dr. Elie Al Hindy. Dr. Elie and Shane, thank you for being with me this evening. Dr. Elie, let's start with you. We've just been talking about Putin and Modi. The timing of this trip is significant. Why are relations with India so key for the Kremlin right now?
You can tell from the big hugs and the warm welcome that the two countries do need each other in a way. But I guess the most important factor that makes this trip very timely is the economic situation inside Russia and the many speculations on how bad the situation is, how much it's influencing the efforts of war of Russia and Ukraine and so on. And I do believe that things are becoming more difficult to hide. There's a very serious economic pressure on the Russian government, and they have been trying to use any form of connection, any form of external relations to try to bring in some hard currency, some economic movement, and so on. Now, what's making it possible is the fact that the US is not really putting on the full-on pressure, like, for example, the sanctions that we've seen on Iran in Trump's first term. And even secondary sanctions that we've seen banning any European country from dealing with Iran or any other country around the world. Even India at the time stopped dealing with Iran and so on. It's not the case yet in Russia. We haven't seen this kind of pressure by the US on Russia. So Russia is definitely trying to find alternative routes. India is one of them. In the general geostrategic perspective, we've seen India and China repair their relations. We've seen India's buying oil of Russia and benefiting from the discounted prices surge significantly since the beginning of the crisis. So India is trying to also be a bit independent from US dependency and from US relations. And it's finding in this kind of relation some kind of benefit for its own economy also.
And there's also been lots of talks about India, which has never really been allied with anyone. It's always kept itself to itself, but becoming more and more closer with the BRICS countries, which has been interesting analysis when we look at this. But right now, Shane, when I look at India, they're walking a real tightrope because obviously the US administration slapped an extra 25% tariff on India for buying Russian oil, accusing them of funding that Kremlin war machine. And they've got to keep the US happy right now, Narendra Modi, and they've want the oil from Russia because it's so discounted. So it's quite a difficult position.
It's like anything. It's hard to just boil it down to a yes or no. So I'll try and make it simple. So if you look at the big top numbers, Going into this meeting, I think sort of India is in the sort of the driving seat in a lot of ways, because if you look at sort of their sort of exports to Russia, it's about like 5 billion. But if you look at going to Washington and the wider US, we're talking 80 billion. So that's like, if you were just to say, right, numbers, if you're an accountant sitting in Delhi, you go, right, okay, Washington is where we're at. But at the same time, the imports from Russia that India gets, it's about sort of 70 billion, and the vast majority of that is oil. And it's not a case where India can just go, all right, we don't want any more of your oil, we're not going to take it, because then they have to turn around and they have to look to Iraq, the Middle East, the US, where the price is going to be a lot higher. And sort of the flip side of that is Putin and the Russians, according to Reuters calculations, the discounts that they're offering India, they've tripled them. So it's kind of like to say, okay, are you really going to go with Washington? We're going to give you lots of more cheap oil, because, like you were saying, the Russian economy sort of needs it, and India is one of their biggest recipients of their oil. So they're just continually discounting it, because offering discounted oil is better than no oil. But what I think is really interesting is again, these sort of geopolitical things are never very straightforward, is that there's a lot of Indian companies that own stakes in Russian oil companies, and there's a lot of Russians that own stakes in Indian companies. So it's not a case that they're just going to flick the switch. And there's a lot of the Indian companies are waiting on dividends from their Russian investments, which are now stuck in Russian banks. So Putin can go, do you want your dividends? Then do you want also to keep taking it? So it's all very interlinked. And it's going to get very, very interesting. But fundamentally, across the top, I would say that India is the one that's sort of the dominant player going in, and Putin is going to go in trying to convince them to keep buying oil because it's in his interest. So he's kind of going on the back foot. And Modi's, I think he's probably going to enjoy this meeting, I would imagine.
Yeah. Well, I think in the sense that if US wanted to corner India and force it to choose, definitely the choice would be, as you said, the bigger interest is with the US. But the US has not done so yet. So India is benefiting from the situation. Maybe the Europeans would be more concerned that India is sending Russia, fresh hard currency and different access to fund the war in Ukraine. Yes, but can Europe and the European Union put this kind of pressure? Not much so, especially that, as you were telling us, that still some European countries are still buying Russian oil, which I find really amazing.
Which is unusual. And the other one I've heard a lot in the reports is that in terms of defense, that India needs Russia for defense. But then Russia doesn't, I can't imagine it's got much defense armory spare to give away to India.
Yeah, this is really interesting. So India wants to buy more S-400 air defense missiles, and they are created in Russia. They're Russian-made. And one of the big reasons for those is it's believed they did very well in the clash against Pakistan, which we did see recently. And what they want to do is buy the S-400 air defense missiles from Russia and the S-500, which can also deal with bigger hypersonic weapons coming across the borders. So what India will be looking at is to try and shore up that kind of military hardware coming out of Russia. And as we know, Russia's been on a war footing and has been producing these
and if they take the same strategy with the oil, where they offer them better discounts on that armory, then they will. But then there's a lot of the other countries that are, the UK is trying to get part of the Indian defense sort of budget. The US is going to be as well. But I think if Putin's smart, he'll say, okay, we'll give you all of this armory and at cheaper prices, but as long as you keep taking our cheap oil as well. So India has to look at, okay, all the tariffs going up, but then is the price of Russian oil going to go down, and then balance the two?
I do also think it's quite interesting, because I had two guests on my show with me a little bit earlier, and I was talking to them. One came from India and one guest came from Russia. And they both said the same thing to me. They said that even if the US tries to squeeze India to stop it buying oil from Russia, the reality is these can be circumvented with shadow shipping, with loopholes. So there's always a way around these things. We've also got to think like that in many respects. They can find different avenues able to access it, because it's just not as easy as cutting it off at a chokehold. There's so many different elements.
And also China is the biggest buyer of Russian oil. So and there's not. I think Washington has less sort of sway with Beijing on that issue. So even if they cut out India, then that just leaves more oil for them to go to China. So I don't think the ultimate aim of sanctioning the partners of Russian oil is really going as straightforward as Trump would like to.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much for your thoughts on that, Shane and Dr. Elie. Stay right there now as we move on to another story. US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff is meeting Ukraine's head of the National Security Council in Miami today, days after his trip to Moscow. Despite spending hours with President Putin, the US peace plan seems no further forward. Ukraine has accused Putin of wasting the world's time. Meanwhile, President Trump maintains the Russian president would like to end the war. Take a listen.
He would like to end the war. That was their impression. Now, whether or not, that was their impression. Their impression was that he would like to see the war ended. I think he'd like to get back to dealing a more normal life. I think he'd like to be trading with the United States of America, frankly, instead of, losing thousands of soldiers a week. But their impression was very strongly that he'd like to make a deal.
Shane, let's start with you here, because I must admit, Steve Witkoff has been one of the busiest men, hasn't he? He's been running all over the show. Now he's off to Miami. So this meeting comes after, basically what I said. We've seen so much diplomacy, shuttle diplomacy. It's been happening everywhere, hasn't it? Everyone's been meeting about meeting. But what can we expect to happen today?
Well, I agree with what Trump said, that Putin wants to end the war, but I think he wants to end the war with a surrender from Ukraine. So I don't think anyone ever really thought he didn't want to end the war, because he thought it would end a couple of years ago, and it would only be a few months. But in terms of what's likely to happen, I'm not very optimistic about any kind of real outcome from the Miami meeting. I do feel like there's been a sort of increase in momentum around the Ukraine issue. I think because Gaza feels like it's that's been solved now. Ukraine is the focal point. But if you look at what the sort of narrative coming out, like the Kremlin said that there was no compromise. Trump described the meeting as in Moscow as reasonably good, and in Trump language that means it was really bad, because he trumpets everything up really big. So I would read that as not a good sign. And like you said, the Ukrainians said that Putin's wasting the world's time. So it doesn't look particularly good. And then, like you said, Putin's in India, and he was on Indian TV, and he said that Russia is looking to take full control of the Donbass region by force. So a lot of the fundamental issues over the land and what size of the army is going to be and joining or not joining NATO, none of these things are solved. So I think I'm still going to be sitting here in 2026 talking about the latest Ukraine talks of talks.
With me?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to pick up on something, Dr. Elie, because Shane mentioned Vladimir Putin's interview today. He was speaking on India TV. It was a pre-recorded interview he did in Moscow, and it has gone out. And one of the things that stood out to me in what he said in this interview was, he also said the US divided its 28-point peace plan into 4 sections. And I was thinking, do you think that Ukraine and Russia are looking at the same peace plan? Because Ukraine right now has a 20-point peace plan. It appears Russia has a 28-point peace plan. There was a 19-point peace plan. Yeah. I mean, has everyone got the same peace plan?
Probably not. And going back to what you mentioned very quickly, now Gaza is solved, let's move on to Ukraine. Is Gaza solved?
No.
It's been flipped. I know. That's what I mean. This is the kind of deals that Witkoff can come up with. It's a general framework agreement that is so vague that everyone would accept. But even that vagueness did not help him out in Ukraine, because Europeans came out and said, come on, what you're presenting is a complete surrender of Ukraine, and behind it Europe, to Putin's will and intentions. So definitely the 28 plan was rejected by all Europeans, by Ukrainians, so they had to sit down and actually remove some of the surrender acts that were included for Ukraine. So I don't think they are looking at the same plan. I don't think they are starting from the same point. I definitely believe, as Shane said, that Putin wants to end the war on his own terms. The problem is that Trump made him feel that he can. And that's why he's not willing to compromise now, currently. And we're seeing him, stand his position even more firmly in that sense. So unless he feels that Trump is very serious in his pressure and he's supporting the Europeans, even partially, we know they don't agree on everything, but unless Putin, as we keep saying in this show, unless Putin feels the pressure, he will not be willing to compromise on any of his positions.
And we looked at that other peace plan, the 28-point one, and Europeans said it was a complete capitulation, if Ukraine was to sign that.
Yeah.
And it was a very difficult situation to be in. And Europe actually did really well pulling that back, helping Ukraine quite significantly. But do you think that, Dr. Elie and Shane, the question to both of you, do you think we've just got to that stage now where Ukraine kind of have to accept that they're going to have to hand over territory in order to get some sort of ceasefire, in order to stop the killing, to just make a change to what's happened? Because this war machine cannot keep on going. In Europe, how long can they keep on funding Ukraine for?
Yeah.
How long can Russia keep on its war footing for? It's hurting both economies.
Definitely. Let me just go back to one point that could potentially explain a little bit why we have so much differences and so much vagueness. It's the more and more visible divide within the US administration between Trump's guys, Witkoff and co, and between the foreign ministry, the State Department's establishment, who have a much wider vision of things, who have a much wider experience in diplomacy, and who know what would go and what would not go ahead. So when they see these flashy items, they would say, oh, hold on, let's see how this practically goes. And this could be potentially the difference between Rubio's speech and discourse and between Witkoff's speech. The things that they are in accord on is that most probably Ukraine will have to de facto practically accept the fact that it will not be able to liberate the parts of its east, the Donbass and the other areas that are now occupied by Russia. And Zelensky did not completely reject this. He says we will never accept officially that these lands are Russian, but he didn't say we will keep fighting and this is a red line that we will not accept.
I think what he is also saying is let's freeze the front line where it is, not take the land.
Because everybody's tired, as you said.
Yeah, because everyone's tired. Let's not let Russia have the land that they haven't gained already. Because, Russia came out and said, oh, we've got Provosk, just as Witkoff and Jared Kushner were arriving. That's been obviously disputed by Ukraine, but Ukraine's saying just freeze it where it is.
Yeah, but I can tell you as an Irish person, that sort of idea of like, oh, we'll give up a bit of land and we'll get it back later, doesn't go well usually, and it doesn't figure out the way you think it is.
Yeah,
so
that is true.
I don't think that's a good plan to work. But I think
that's the only plan you have. That's the only option.
Exactly. Look at Northern Ireland. That did not work out well.
Good point. But also another thing we must remember: Steve Witkoff is Trump's buddy that he played golf with. He's a finance guy. He has his own interests in Russia. He knows it's a place where he can make money financially, and it's all a little bit murky around the corners.
And that clip you showed, I thought the interesting bit was when Trump was talking about, Putin wants to get back to trading. And I'm thinking, well, Trump probably wants to get back to trading with Russia as well. It's all about the money. It's
all about
the
the money.
So, yeah.
One important factor that we need to note is, again, the European role in all of this. So you mentioned the territory, and this is probably a given by now. But what about the security measures and the security requirements? I think these are as important for Europe as they are for Ukraine. And it's not even a choice for Ukraine to refuse this, because it's a security for Europe altogether. We've seen UK move strategically recently on classifying the GRU as a banned organization. They've signed yesterday or even today the strategic defense with Norway, the maritime domain awareness and the defense pact with Norway to monitor all the Northern Sea. And I've seen some statistic recently by one of my colleagues, an Irish colleague. He showed me the fact that in the Ireland and in the UK waters, we've seen an increase of 35% of presence of Russian vessels in the waters around the UK. So they definitely feel the heat. They definitely are more invested in it than Trump, who is only looking at business, and they really see it as a security threat. How much can they go on? How much can they afford? This is where all the money comes in and the Russian frozen assets come into the whole discussion.
And that's a discussion for another day. Belgium don't want to release those frozen assets at the moment, but things change quickly. Thank you for your thoughts on that. Let's move on to another story now. And US Democrats have released a number of images of Jeffrey Epstein's island. Pictures and videos from the US Virgin Island property show a room adorned with masks, a dental chair, and a black chalkboard with the words truth, deception and power written on them. The images have become public after President Trump signed a bill to release the government files on the convicted sex offender. A few new pictures have come out. I must admit, Dr. Elie, when I looked at them, I thought it was going to be a little bit more glamorous than it was. It was more creepy. Does this increase trust in the investigation or, of course, deepen suspicion and conspiracy?
Creepy is the term.
It's so creepy.
Yeah, I've been to a couple of Caribbean islands, and they're a lot more upmarket than
I wasn't expecting
Not that one, actually.
I know, I was expecting something much more.
You know, if billionaires are hanging out with, you know, former leaders and royalty, I was like, that's not really...
Yeah, but they, again, that's not where you go for luxury. You go there
like,
for other objectives.
It's like a dentist chair and mask. It's very odd.
It's definitely all perversions that we could think of were happening on that island. It's really catastrophic. But I noticed that even the chalkboard was redacted.
Yes.
And this is, again, adding, as you are saying, this is adding the suspicion, this is adding the conspiracy theory. The people are expecting to see all the files, but even then, I think we are having more and more questions rather than answers about it all.
Which is the problem, I think, because it's kind of like crying wolf. If you bring all the stuff out and go, oh my God, it's really scandalous, but we're not going to tell you this bit, then people will eventually get frustrated and they won't even look at them. And like I said, I looked up the Google search for Trump. And and it this is a very crude version, but it peaked at around sort of like November when the came out. But all this latest stuff, it's just dribbled back down again.
Yeah.
So,
even with the recent photos.
And so I think people
are
going to get quite bored of it. But I can see from the Democrat point of view, they want to kind of keep it in the forefront because they're hoping that the MAGA community and voters will eventually, it'll chip away at there. And some of the Reuters polls did show that 20% of Americans don't approve of how Epstein's handled it. It's 44 in Republicans, but that's still 56 that are not. So I think people will eventually kind of get a little bit tired of it and the impact of it will sort of wane. But I personally don't think there's anything bad in there for Trump. I don't think there's a smoking gun in there. And I was quite actually impressed when it turned out that he actually threw Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago for whatever weird behavior he was up to. So I think that actually made Trump look good. And I think that wasn't the impression that Trump... And I'm not a supporter of Trump, as you know, but I was quite impressed.
Why then was he so hesitant, as we were discussing?
Because I think there's probably stuff in there about his allies, and other people that he maybe wants to protect, rather than him personally. And the other way, it's all transactional. So if he's like, I'll keep the Epstein files quiet, and then what are you going to give me? So.
Yeah.
I also think there was another argument to that. It was actually to keep the victims safe. A lot of the victims don't want to be named who were in those Epstein files.
But again, redacting victims' names is completely acceptable by any norm.
So it's quite interesting because, you know, after Donald Trump did say in his campaign that he would release the Epstein files, it never happened. Pam Bondi, of course, said there was a list, and then all of a sudden there wasn't a list, and then the FBI director, Kash Patel,
said... It was on her desk, but then it
disappeared. Kash Patel, the FBI director, also said, it's morbid, we don't want to release it, there's nothing to see here. But we saw Marjorie Taylor Greene, who was a Trump supporter, one of the MAGA base heroines. She was by him the whole side, and she actually left over this Epstein thing and had a big fallout with Donald Trump. So it has had a rippling effect on how it was handled.
Definitely, and again, this is one of the key issues, but not the only issue, where the MAGA base is either divided or does not agree with what Trump is doing. And Trump is really keen on keeping it together, the upcoming midterm elections and so on. He really does not want to divide or upset the big majority of the MAGA. And for many people, this is a red line, and they want to go through with it, and they want to really see what was happening there and hold people accountable. All those who voted on Trump based on, anti-wokeness, based on conservative values, and so on.
I do find it fascinating, though, because Epstein, we're talking about it right now, but the tangents of Epstein just seem to have spread everywhere.
Yeah, it does. It does feel like we're not into the final act yet.
No.
There's more to come, and I kind of feel like there is going to be a final twist, and we don't know what that is. But was it Friday, December 19th is the deadline for the 30 days when it'll all be released? So we may find out then, but I feel we won't.
I just think it's going to be heavily redacted again.
It'll be like a letdown, a bit like like you were saying, like the JFK files, the Diana files. There was nothing really that spectacular. So I think as they drip feed it, then the sort of explosiveness will diminish, I think.
And I think that we've seen the agenda in the American public move on from Epstein being the top of it to, if you have a look at the polls, the top concern there is the economic cost of living and how expensive things are. So domestic issues in the economy in the US are definitely overshadowing the Epstein files that everyone thought would have so many people's names on, and nothing's really appeared.
Yeah, but then on the flip side, if you're going to be conspiracy theorists, you could say that, well, while we're all talking about Epstein, we're not talking about the price of eggs and what's going up or down.
So keeping us busy.
Because, Trump's very good at, shifting the narrative and look over here, and then something else is going on over there.
Floods the zone.
Yeah.
Donald Trump, yeah. Thank you so much for your thoughts on that. Let's move on now. And social media platform maker Meta has started removing Australian under-16s from Instagram, Facebook and Threads. It's ahead of a social media ban that kicks in for children down under in a week's time. Around 150,000 Facebook profiles and 350,000 Instagram accounts are now expected to be shut down. Okay. Let's get into this, because there's lots of different schools of thoughts when it comes to this story. Will this actually protect kids, or could it push them into a darker space which is now unregulated online? Because, they're more tech savvy than we are, let's be honest. They've got their ways.
The answer is, I think it's some ways it will, but you're right. I don't know if kids are going to start digging into the dark web, or I could be not very naive about that. But when I looked to try and figure out would this happen, but there are a lot of other rival social media ones that are not covered by this ban, which in Australia I've already seen a massive surge in usage. So kids are already going, okay, well, Facebook is old anyway. Nobody their age under 16 probably uses it anyway. So there's other stuff like Cover Star, Lemonade. I don't want to give them too much publicity, but they're the ones that people are going to just flip over to. But in general, I would like to see this experiment sort of play out, but I'm all about the facts and the figures. I kind of want to wait 2 years and see has it had any kind of impact. But I generally think I'm going to go with the communications minister, Anika Wells, who said that she knows the law is not perfect, but this is such an important issue, it's worth having a crack at. And I am going to side with her, because I think it'll protect the most vulnerable kids who get bullied, and I think the kids who just want to go on and watch YouTube or Meta or some of the other ones and can benefit from it. I think protecting the vulnerable is better than just letting kids who should be out playing football anyway. What do you think, Leigh-Ann?
We're both siding against you on this.
Yeah, they're both siding against me on this.
Yeah.
I'm not in favour of this. And
why is that?
There's lots of reasons why it is, but one of my main reasons is it seems pretty nanny state to me that now they're going to decide to control what they have access to, people 16 and under. And I do think we are moving into a world, and we might all not agree with how fast things are moving, but we are now in a social media world, and we are in a world where we have devices with us all the time. And I think it's important in many ways that maybe they should be looking at ways to ensure that children are on these sites for the right reasons. Maybe at school, there should be classes like they're doing in the UK with the Online Safety Act that they've brought in there. They're teaching children how to spot things on social media that aren't true, how to manage your social media, to have awareness of it, because it's going to be with us forevermore. And I just think this is a bit of a dangerous situation to be like, okay, there's a ban, but when you're 16, everything can come back in. And there's a lot of education on social media too.
That's not going to be banned. That's normal.
No, but I'm saying,
Nobody gets education from Facebook or Instagram or...
But that's all blocked. Facebook, Instagram,
yes,
Snapchat,
because you don't get
TikTok,
education
Twitter.
there. You only get harmful things and maybe
But
some
you don't only
communication.
get harmful things on those platforms. There's a lot of educational
Yeah,
stuff
but
on them.
you can't control whether the kids watch the harmful stuff. And it's not even just the proactively like looking at stuff that's good for them and education. It's that like on WhatsApp or Instagram or messaging, I know you can block kids, but if they get when we went to school, you went home and then that was like a relatively safe environment. Now you've got social media. If there's somebody who's picking on you in school, they can WhatsApp you, they can put stuff on Facebook. So I get what you're saying. There's positive benefits of social media, but I think under 16, I think I agree with the Australian government, and I think let's wait a few years if it works, then, which I hope it does. Then I think it'll probably be implemented in Europe.
I don't see any benefit of children under 16 being on social media.
How can Dr. Elie not be on my
Because
side?
I have children, you know.
And I don't have children. That's fair. Fair.
But again, no, I've really experienced that this is an unfiltered territory whatsoever. It exposes your children to absolutely everything, and out of the everything, the majority is harmful material. Maybe there is some good. I'm sure there is some good that you can learn from the social media, but the damage outweighs by far the benefits that you can get from that. And again, back to the role of the government. I am completely against, a nanny government or that kind of intervention. But I believe that protecting vulnerable underage children is one of the most essential roles of the government when nobody else can do that. If the parents were doing their job, then we wouldn't even be discussing this. But we know they didn't, and we know they wouldn't in the future. So the government has the duty to protect the children from harmful material again. If you could control, again, my problem with that law is not the principle. I'm all for the principle. My problem with that law is that its implementation is very problematic. Its details are very challenging. It's how do you identify the age and confirm the age is very problematic. What tools are you used? Do you have access to the people IDs or not? All of these have been the discussion, much less the discussion over whether the government should be banning or not, in my opinion.
And it says in the rules that I was reading today that the Australian government expects the social media users to take reasonable steps. Well, like what's reasonable steps?
Yeah.
And they'll just do the bare minimum, because at the end of the day, there's no financial incentive for them to lose all of their users under 16.
But they're afraid of a very big fine that
Yes,
could be up to
25 million.
Million.
They could be fined,
Yes.
which is really interesting. But I think it is an interesting debate to have. I do think, though, that there needs to be... I feel this is very nanny state, and that's why I'm probably opposed to it more than I should be, because I think that they're also shifting it onto the companies. So the government have shifted this onto the companies to deal with, and that's a big task for these big companies to take on. And I just think the whole thing seems a little bit confusing, like they're already shutting down accounts 10 days before.
Definitely.
No one knows how it's going to be
It's the
managed.
first in the world. It's going to be chaos for a while. We
Yeah,
have to wait
yeah,
and see,
completely.
as Sharon was saying, to see the effect on the long term. The implementation, the initial implementation, definitely is going to see some chaos. And we have to also mention that the High Court has decided just a few hours ago that it will hear the teenagers who have appealed this. Doesn't mean that they will get anything, but the High Court considered that their appeal is worth looking into, and it will hear them soon enough.
And their appeal was on educational grounds.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for your thoughts on that. Now it's that time of the show where Shane and Dr. Elie have chosen two of their quirkiest stories of the day. Sometimes I wonder, Dr. Elie, where you find your stories from. Yours is about Taiwan's ambassador to Finland and his other hobby outside of politics. And I don't know if we have a clip of it or it might come up, but just tell us about it.
Well, we've seen the Taiwanese ambassador in Finland, Freddie Lim, practicing his favorite hobby, which is heavy metal. And him taking it all the way, as you could see, shirtless on the stage, going on with heavy metal singing. And again, an ambassador practicing his hobby is all fine. Practicing his hobby in public and in such a way, for me, it becomes a bit controversial. You know, I teach diplomacy, it's all about protocol, it's all about representing your country, it's all about presenting the tradition and the culture of your country. I don't think this is the best representation of Taiwan's culture. We definitely, as we were saying, Finland is very open to metal and all kind of liberal ideas. Yes, I think he could have found the setup, but again, for me, it's a bit too much for an ambassador. How can you take him seriously the next day? I mean, it's really problematic. It goes out of all concepts of diplomacy, and for me, it was really surprising and amazing to see. So I wanted to share that with you.
I absolutely love it. I don't know. I think it's quite cool that he's got a bit of a niche going on, Shane.
Yeah.
You know, he's doing his diplomatic talks in the day. He's rocking out on stage in the evening. Why not?
Yeah, bring out the Frere Rocher with a bit of leather kind of.
Yeah.
It's strange. Yeah, I think, like you said, I think it'll go. Maybe the flip side of it is that it'll go down well in Finland, which is where he's the ambassador to. Like Finns love sort of heavy metal rock, and it kind of shows him as
Probably that's why they chose him as a
So I think like in the future they're like, right, let's see your diplomacy skills, but also let's see you rock out with your shirt off.
I don't know if this makes sense, but sometimes I like to know that my politicians are human. You know, because
I think so too.
Like politicians, and they're very sort of, statement-like, which is great because that's what they always should be like. But sometimes I'm like, what do you like in your pajamas at home, or what's your hobby? Because remember they asked, I think it was Boris Johnson, his hobby when he was the British Prime Minister, and he said he liked making model trains, which I thought was quite sweet.
Yeah, and Theresa May ran through
a wheat field.
A wheat field.
There's a very famous quote that I read recently is that, today it's not about accountability. Politics is not about accountability, it's about transparency. The people don't want to hold you accountable to your campaign promises. They just want you to be very transparent. And if something doesn't work out and you go up and say, this did not work out because of this and that, they would simply forgive and move on. They would not hold the accountability part very strongly, but the transparency. Because as you said, we want to see these people, real people. We want to see them human. We want to see them with their frailty, with their problems, and feel that they are one of us and we are similar to them in that way.
And I think that makes people feel more involved in politics.
But the difference is, so one last sentence, for politicians who go for people's votes, yes. But for a public servant, as a diplomat, on a mission to represent his country, for me is less so.
He went on another mission.
Yeah.
But Shane, let's settle the debate. Is Die Hard a Christmas movie or is it not a Christmas movie?
Well,
what kind of question is that? Of course it is.
Well, I put it on two of my WhatsApp face groups with my mates, and 66% of them said it is. But according to the Board of Film Classifications study, 44% of Brits said it is not. 38% said it did, so it's still quite tight. I think
you have to see which one from the series is closer to.
I think it's set during Christmas, but that doesn't make it a Christmas movie. And I think there's this, I think of a Christmas movie, I think of those really cheesy Hallmark ones where a girl leaves New York and goes back and falls in love with a lumberjack type thing. Or Santa Claus the movie, which is 40 years old last week, which I remember as a kid. So I'm inclined to believe that, but the most popular Christmas movie was Home Alone, which then gets a lot of debate whether that's a Christmas movie or not. Again, I feel like I'm such a Grinch. I would think it's probably not really. But then here's a question for you. When do you think it is acceptable to start watching Christmas-themed movies? Because that was in the survey as well.
Before I answer that, let me tell you that since you said the Epstein files will be released on 19 December, they will be the best Christmas movies coming up.
We'll be reading them for Christmas.
We'll be reading them
the
over
Epstein
Christmas.
files, yeah, that is very true.
Like a good movie, CD movie.
Dr. Elie, I've never watched Die Hard, but you say it's a Christmas film. You say it's not. I've never seen it. And when should you start watching Christmas films? Do you know what? I don't really care. Like, I'm going to admit something. I don't really watch films. I can't believe I'm actually saying this, but I don't really have the attention span for a film. You know, it's very long for me. So I don't know. I don't know. I don't know when you should start watching Christmas films. Whenever you like.
Well, according to 43% of people in the survey said they start in December and 13% start in November. I think November is a bit too soon.
Yeah, I think so.
I think you can start listening to Christmas songs then, because that's usually the rule after Halloween is over. Then Mariah Carey defrosts and starts singing.
I love her song.
So yeah, hers is great. But actually,
Love her song.
one of my colleagues is married to a Filipino, and he said they start 3 months in advance.
Wow.
So that's like a long season.
It's again, I think it's up to preparing yourself in the mood for Christmas,
Yes.
right? And watching the movies, for me, it would be whenever I start the vacation, not before that. I wouldn't have time to watch the
me
movies
neither.
before
I never
that.
have time.
But the preparations and then the ceremonies and then the, you know, all the roads design and all the these things, I think it's normal that in most countries they start around the end of November or early December. And usually this date is connected to a certain other dates, either Thanksgiving for the US, either the 4th of December for Eastern Christians, the St. Barbara Day, or other dates like that. And usually it stops around 6th of the January, the Epiphany.
Yeah, we were always very strict that you had to have everything done and never mention Christmas again on the, you know, when the wise men arrived and you put them in the crib.
Yes.
And then that's Christmas over and done with.
That was it. And my Christmas tree's up already. I know a lot of people think that's too early, but it's so nice to have a Christmas tree up. I might watch a Christmas film. Elf, if I was to choose a Christmas film.
That's the 4th popular movie.
I love that film. It's very, very cute. But anyway, we're all going to go and watch a Christmas movie now. Why not?
No, it's too early.
Oh, it's too early for Dr. Elie. He's not off work yet.
Still have marking to do.
Yeah. Thanks to tonight's guest, Shane McGinley, news editor at Arabian Gulf Business Insight and chairperson of the Department of Security and Strategic Studies at the American University in the Emirates, Dr. Elie Al Hindy. And that's all from us on W News Extra. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Of course, follow us on X. GMT will be coming up next. Goodbye and thank you.